Second session of the First Parliament of Charles II. Edinburgh, May 1662. Act for preservation of His Majesty's person, authority, and government. The Estates of Parliament take into their consideration the miseries, confusions, bondage, and oppressions this kingdom hath groaned under since the year 1637 years, with the causes and occasions thereof, do with all humble duty and thankfulness acknowledge His Majesty's unparalleled grace and goodness in passing by the many miscarriages of His subjects and restoring the Church and State to their ancient liberties, freedom, rights, and possessions, and the great obligations thereby lying upon them to express all possible care and zeal in the preservation of His Majesty's person, in whose honor and happiness consisteth the good and welfare of His people, and in the strength and security, and in the security and establishment of His royal authority and government against all such wicked attempts and practices for the time to come. And, since the rise and progress of the late troubles did, in a great measure, proceed from some treasonable and seditious positions infused upon the people, that it was lawful to subjects, for reformation, to enter into covenants and leagues, or to take up arms against the king, or those commissionated by him, and such like, and that many wild and rebellious courses were taken and practised in pursuance thereof, by unlawful meetings and gatherings of the people, by munitions and tumultuous petitions, by insolent and seditious protestations against His Majesty's royal and just commands, by entering into unlawful oaths and covenants, by usurping the name and power of council tables and church judicatories, after they were by His Majesty discharged, by treasonable declarations, that His Majesty was not to be admitted to the exercise of His royal power, until He should grant their unjust desires and approve their wicked practices, by rebellious rising in arms against His Majesty and such as had commission from Him, and by the great countenance, allowance, and encouragement given to these pernicious courses by the multitude of seditious sermons, libels, and discourses, preached, printed, and published in defense thereof, and considering that as the present age is not full freed of those distempers, so posterity may be apt to relapse therein, if timious remede be not provided. Therefore the King's Majesty and Estates of Parliament do declare that these positions, that it is unlawful to subjects, upon pretense of reformation, or other pretense whatsoever, to enter into leagues and covenants, or to take up arms against the King, or that it is lawful to subjects, pretending His Majesty's authority, to take up arms against His person, or those commissionated by Him, or to suspend Him from the exercise of His royal government, or to put limitations upon their due obedience and allegiance, are rebellious and treasonable, and that all these gatherings, convocations, petitions, protestations, and erecting and keeping of council tables that were used in the beginning and for carrying on of the late troubles were unlawful and seditious, and particularly that these oaths, whereof the one was commonly called the National Covenant, as it was sworn and explained in the year 1638 and thereafter, and the other entitled A Solemn League and Covenant, were and are in themselves unlawful oaths, and were taken by and imposed upon the subjects of this kingdom against the fundamental laws and liberties of the same, and that there lieth no obligation upon any of the subjects from the said oaths, or either of them, to endeavor any change or alteration of government, either in church or state, and therefore annuls all acts and constitutions, ecclesiastical or civil, approving the said pretended national covenant or league and covenant, or making any interpretations of the same or either of them. And also it is hereby declared by His Majesty and Estates of Parliament that the pretended assembly kept at Glasgow in the year 1638 was, in itself, after the same was by His Majesty discharged under the pain of treason, an unlawful and seditious meeting, and that all acts, deeds, sentences, orders, or decrees passed therein, or by virtue of any pretended authority from the same, were in themselves from the beginning, are now, and in all time coming, to be reputed unlawful, void, and null, and that all ratifications or confirmations of the same passed by whatsoever authority, or in whatsoever meetings, shall from henceforth be void and null. Like as His Majesty and Estates of Parliament, reflecting on the sad consequences of these rebellious courses, and being careful to prevent the like for the future, have therefore statute and ordained, and by these present statutes ordains, that if any person or persons shall hereafter plot, contrive, or intend destruction to the King's Majesty, or any bodily harm tending to death or destruction, or any restraint upon his royal person to deprive, depose, or suspend him from the style, honor, and kingly name of the imperial crown of this realm, or any others, his Majesty's dominions, or to suspend him from the exercise of his royal government, or to levy war, or to take up arms against his Majesty and any commissionated by him, or shall entice any strangers or others to invade any of his Majesty's dominions, and shall by writing, printing, preaching, or other malicious and advised speakings express or declare such their treasonable intentions, every such person or persons, being upon sufficient probation, legally convicted thereof, shall be deemed, declared, and adjudged traitors, and shall suffer forfeiture of life, honor, lands, and goods, as in cases of high treason. And further, it is by his Majesty and Estates of Parliament declared, statute and enacted, that if any person or persons, by writing, printing, praying, preaching, libeling, remonstrating, or by any malicious and advised speaking, express, publish, or declare any words or sentences to stir up the people to the hatred or dislike of his Majesty's royal prerogative and supremacy in causes ecclesiastic, or of the government of the Church by archbishops and bishops, as it is now settled by law, or to justify any of the deeds, actings, practices, or things above mentioned and declared against by this present act, that every such person or persons so offending, and being, as said is, legally convicted thereof, are hereby declared incapable to enjoy or exercise any place or employment, civil, ecclesiastical, or military, within this church and kingdom, and shall be liable to such further pains as are due by law in such cases, provided always that no person be processed in any of the offenses aforesaid contained in this act, or than these that are declared to be high treason, unless it be by order from his Majesty, or by order of his privy council for the time. Neither shall they incur any of the penalties above mentioned, unless they be pursued within 8 months after the offense committed, and sentenced thereupon within 4 months after the intenting of the process. It is also declared that if his Majesty grant his pardon to any person convicted for any of the offences contained in this present act, after such pardon, the party pardoned shall be restored to all intents and purposes, as if he had never been pursued nor convicted anything in this act to the contrary notwithstanding.